All right, welcome again. Thank you all for attending Democratic Club of Sunnyvale General Meeting. Today, I'll be moderating a panel of recently elected and endorsed local candidates. We'll be talking about what went well in this election and what didn't, how the club can better support future candidates and elections. We'll hear about the effectiveness of the candidate forums, impact of district elections, campaign finances, independent expenditures, all kinds of great stuff. And afterwards, we'll open to audience Q&A. So be thinking of your questions as the panelists are speaking. All right, so panelists we're expecting are Patrick Ahrens, Mayor Larry Klein, Pat Carpio, Eileen Lay, and Peggy Shen Brewster. All right, but first we have a special edition from our political director, Martin Pyne, giving us a debrief. Why don't you sit at the table? Debrief on the election.
Hi, yeah, we had an election week and a half ago, and there were national results. I don't want to talk about the national results. But there were also local results. The local results were, I'll just run down all the local races that we endorsed in. Let's start with, there was a congressional race. Brocana won very easily. I honestly didn't even track that race very hard because it was a foregone conclusion. There wasn't a supervisor race because that one got decided back in March. There were a couple other supervisor races that the club may actually be interested in. We didn't endorse in those, but for Supervisor District 2, Betty Duong beat Madison Nguyen with the 53.5% of the vote. And in District 5, Margaret Abe Koga beat Sally Lieber with 57.25% of the vote. We didn't have a state Senate race this year. We did have a state assembly race this year. The club dual endorsed both candidates that made the runoff. Patrick Ahrens beat Tara Sri Krishnan with a hair under 56% of the vote as of the most recent update. City races. Larry Klein, who we endorsed, was reelected as our mayor with a overwhelming margin, 72.75% of the vote. In District 2, our endorsed candidate, Alyssa Cisneros, was reelected with 69% of the vote. In District 4, our endorsed candidate, Charles C. Chang, won with 100% of the vote because nobody ran against her. In District 6, our endorsed candidate, Eileen Lay, won with slightly under 55% of the vote, and this was a 3-person race, so that's even more impressive. Community college districts, we endorsed in West Valley Mission Area 2. Our endorsed candidate, Paul Fong, was elected with 56.25% of the vote. In Fremont Union High School District, we endorsed Pat Carpio for Trustee Area 2. She beat a Republican Moms for Liberty candidate with a 75.75% of the vote, which is a lot. And we didn't endorse her because the trustee area doesn't touch Sunnyvale, but since it does affect us, in Trustee Area 5, Danny Choi, who I think is safe to say was our preferred, he was at least my preferred candidate, beat friend of better Cupertino, Jean Lee, with 53.25% of the vote. So that's good. Uh, uh, County Board of Education, our endorsed candidate for trustee area one was Jessica Spicer, who looks to have beaten Grace Small with 51.3% of the vote. Uh, uh, the last school board we endorsed in was Cupertino Union. That was kind of a mixed decision for us. We endorsed Sylvia Leong and Doug Kuntz. The winners were Sylvia Leong with 35.89% and unfortunately Long Zhao with 21%. Lakshmi Sharma took 19.3% and Doug Kuntz took 17.3%. I think there was some vote splitting there that did not work in our favor. El Camino Healthcare Director, we endorsed Carol Ann Summersville and Julia Miller. This was a vote for 3. There were only 2 Democrats running. Carol got 29.75% of the vote. Julia got 28.25% of the vote. And the other incumbent, John Zoglin, got 25.75% of the vote. They are all comfortably ahead of Lynette Lee Eng with 16.25% of the vote. So that gets us to ballot measures. This was kind of a mess. Well, the good news was Measure Y got one with 82% of the vote. That was the school district special tax. The less good news was was that the library bond only got 59% of the vote, and it needed 2/3. And the charter amendment only got 37.5% of the vote. We didn't actually endorse on Measure F because I don't think anybody was asking for Measure F, but yeah, it only got 37.5%. So that I think covers all of the local elections we endorsed in or otherwise covers Sunnyvale. Did anybody have any questions or comments about those or any other election? The mic. No, yes, statewide ballot measures were A, kind of a mess, and B, it's on a screen I didn't have up at the moment, but yeah, Prop 5 is on 44.7%, which is not going to be enough, which is not going to pass. There are a couple ballot measures that are kind of close at the moment, although it's a week and a half after the election, so you need to be better than kind of close. What it looks like happened is that propositions 2, 3, and 4 passed, 34, 35, and 36 passed, 5, 6, 32, and 33 failed. The caveats are 32 and 34 are relatively close, but I don't think they're close enough to flip at this point. But I haven't double checked to see if they've actually been called. If like 32, if 32 flips, I will be happy but surprised. It's at 49.1% of the vote.
To the results of the judge races, Santa Clara County.
Yeah. Judicial. Yeah. Judicial races. Blah, blah, blah. Well, there was one judicial race, and Janine Linda Stebbins won with 56.75% of the vote. Over Jay Boyarski.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? For those online, the question is from Margaret Lawson about the charter and why that failed.
Hi, Richard Mellinger, Sunnyvale City Council. This is just theorizing. But one of the questions that got asked at the Charter Review Committee interviews was for the candidates' perception on why Measure F failed, and some key themes that appeared that I think are important. One, bundling 3 disparate changes together in the same ballot measure was probably a mistake. And, thought these were 3 fairly non-controversial items, but having all 3 bundled together, I think, was confusing to voters. 2, there was clearly some opposition to the idea of non-citizens serving on commissions. I think that we needed to have a much more active campaign explaining what that meant and what it didn't mean. I think that created a lot of confusion. So I think an active campaign was really important and necessary for this. From my perspective, when we decided to put this on the ballot from council earlier in the year, I was like, you know what? These are simple. These are no-brainers. This is not something that really needs to be actively campaigned for. Boy, howdy, I'm never going to make that mistake again. But I think it really does come down to, having, bundling was a mistake and we needed to have an active campaign. So that's my analysis, and others may vary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Online, it looks like we have a question from Carrie Levin.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I voted no on the library bond, and the reason being, I just felt that $290 million was a bit excessive. I don't recall, and maybe there have been a community survey done on it a while ago. I just don't recall off the bat, but maybe there's something can be looked at. Will there be another bond to bring the cost down? What other reasons why other people voted no on it? I'm curious. That's my question out there.
I mean, that's
Sure. So let me say a few words. So we did do polling and the cost as well. And so we did polling of like AB polling, renovation, ABC polling, renovation versus a 90,000 square foot library versus 120,000 square foot library. And the cost as well as kind of the size between a 290,000 or $290 million, 120,000 square foot library versus, and I forget what the price tag of the, what was it? 250 or a little 240, 90,000 square foot library. They polled exactly the same. And so that was one of the reasons when it came to council, go big, but to a certain degree, because we then have space to grow over the next 50 years or whatever, as opposed to the smaller price tag. I do think a smaller price tag would possibly have passed a little bit easier. That being said, so our council next year will do, and staff will do a further evaluation on what the next steps are. Is it downsizing? Is it, looking for other funding sources, all that, but that will be for next year. But yeah, ultimately we did do polling. We tried to, and they were both polling, very similar between, 59 and 71%. So, we ended up at a low end of that range at the end of the day. And thank you for everyone who helped out. There was an active campaign to try to get the bond passed for the library, as opposed to back in 2009. It was a very limited campaign. So I appreciate all that effort, but council will be figuring out next steps forward sometime next year. Hopefully that answers all that parts of the question. Thanks.
Also, I'm just going to say there's a library book sale today, so if you do want to support the library, buy books. It's also a bag sale noon to 3 tomorrow, $5 a bag. So if you think having a library, so I'm just going to throw that out there. And I'm just going to say that if I were the god, that if I had the power to devise campaign finance punishments, the people that had illegal campaign activity against Measures ENF would get a very hefty surcharge on their book sale purchases. I recognize that this is not actually something that PPC can impose, but we can dream.
Okay, well, thank you, Martin, for that election summary and a little bit of Q&A. Next, I would like to invite our panelists to come forward and sit up here. So Mayor Klein, elected to a second full term as Sunnyvale Mayor. Eileen Lay, elected to Sunnyvale City Council District 6. Pat Carpio, elected to FUHSD Trustee Area 2. And Peggy Shen Brewster, elected to Sunnyvale School District Board, Trustee Area 4. And Button. All right, we were also expecting Patrick Ahrens. Don't see him online either. So if he comes, we will welcome him. Thank you all and congratulations. All right, there's a few questions that I'll be asking that are for specific people, and I'll ask those specific people. But if you also want to chime in on the topic, just let me know after the other person is finished. Then there's also a few questions for the whole panel. And then afterwards, we'll take audience Q&A. All right, we'll start with Mayor Klein. What advice would you give the Democratic Club to support future city council candidates in either deciding to run or running a campaign?
So supporting candidates, I appreciate all the support that the Dem Club has done. For me, that was one of the biggest things as running for mayor is getting the support of those local institutions and local leaders. Definitely from an encouragement standpoint, I think that's a bigger question. It's trying to find people that want to step into, and I think the biggest portion of being on council is being part of our boards and commissions. So encouraging people to get more involved in your city. And that's what I constantly do is trying to, try to find people to get involved, giving back. Being on city council isn't just something that you jump to. And I think that's when you start looking at people who've run in the past, people who run in this election, that to me shouldn't be your first step of trying to be a community engage with the community. And so, finding what I encourage the Dem Club is continue to push your members to try to make sure that they give back to the community in different ways, nonprofits, and especially our boards and commissions, because that's the best stepping stone to being on council.
Thank you. Other panelists would like to answer that question as well, or?
I think right now with the results of the federal election, there's a huge thirst to get involved at local levels. And I think that the Dems Club, as well as other organizations, are in a position to capitalize on that. There's a lot of desire to do something. I think Kamala said that during the DNC. And I think right now, even though maybe because of what happened at the federal level, there are so many people who still want to do something. I think that right now we can make a very deliberate effort at recruitment for local levels of governance, for foundations, for other things that we need good people on. I think it's so important to build a bench, to have people who are ready to step up to positions as they open up, so that we have people who are waiting in the wings to be able to fill these elected roles. Because as Larry said, this isn't something that you should jump into, and it's scary to jump into it immediately, but to be able to meet people in the community, to talk to people, to get an idea of how to start solving their problems, I think we can start there. And I think that's what we should do.
Thank you. So I'm a teacher, and the reason I say that before anything else, even in my name, is because we're always thinking, how do we communicate to what we know to those that don't yet? And so I have to break things down from a very conceptual, abstract level to the application level with my students every day. And when I started less than 6 months ago thinking about running for school board, obviously it was new to me. And as a teacher, you think, oh, we'll figure it out. And you do. But I would have really appreciated some sort of playbook, I guess, because as a candidate, I would have succumbed in this race had it not been for all the people who know how to do things in a campaign, who know who to ask the questions to, and also the timeline. So I started, like I said, less than 6 months ago to campaign, having never had any political experience. And I was very fortunate that people came to help out and give information. So I think if there is a consolidation of how the steps work and what would make your campaign fruitful, and you don't have to go knock on doors to find that out and make mistakes along the way, as the mayor very well knows. Like, I aggressively sat across from him when he was enjoying lunch one day, and I'm like, oh, I guess you don't do this. So anyway, little things like that would really help. And you don't even know the names of people that you're supposed to be talking to or the codes that you're supposed to be using during campaign. And it would help to avoid some embarrassment, I guess, as a newbie, and also to show yourself that you can do this because the steps are already written out, and all you have to do is become electable through who you are, and I guess following the rules. So that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a great segue. Sunnyvale for Equity in Education actually got a grant through Bend the Arc with the Snail Neighborhood Association, since we're not a nonprofit, to make a sort of, well, we pitched a playbook of sorts to help people be more interested in participating in the community, and to kind of, as Eileen said, fill that bench and find candidates locally and just support that process. And we also need help with this specific project. So if this is something you might be interested in, please contact me. And I think just in general, we've seen a rise in participation. I credit largely Leadership Sunnyvale for my ability to kind of navigate through the community better, as well as, just the community interest. But I agree with Eileen that we need to be building that bench all the time, looking for a succession, and, kind of just hint at people, maybe this is something that you might want to do in the future, and then continue to support them in all those ways.
All right, thank you. I love the playbook idea. There's playbooks on the other side, so might as well capitalize on that. Okay, next question is for Eileen. So this was your first campaign for city council, and I believe only the second campaign that was run for District 6 since moving to district elections for the city. What did you learn and what surprised you?
So I am currently a Sunnyvale School Board trustee, but I didn't have to run for that job. I walked on unopposed, and it was such a different experience having to run and put myself out there in the community and to meet people. And to me, it was a hugely beneficial one, because as a Sunnyvale School Board trustee, I was like thrust in. I didn't have the opportunity to talk to my constituents beforehand and really learn about what their problems are, what their concerns are. But the whole process of running it was so interesting to me because, of course, you like try to knock on as many doors as you can. And some people really don't like that. I'm going to say most people whose doors I knocked on were not answering, and then like when they answered was like not even 50-50. It was like 60-40 on whether or not they actually wanted to talk to me or even like smile. And the thing is that I was doing this with a baby strapped to my chest. And like when you don't even want to smile at the cute baby, like what am I even doing here? So that was interesting. But I did get some really great conversations, and I was able to talk to some of my neighbors, some of my future constituents about things that mattered to them. And that was so valuable. And not just that, but also the endorsement process that I went for so many different organizations, like just learning about groups and what their priorities are, groups that in the future I hope to be working with, like, the Sierra Club, with other Democratic clubs, with Planned Parenthood. And that was just such a great experience for me to be able to learn how to do the job before I actually, start on the job. So that was really interesting. The previous run for District 6, I think, happened during the pandemic. And I think that was a very different campaigning experience for everyone who had the opportunity to run that year. So I'm not entirely sure it's comparable, to whatever extent that what I have done is replicable. I will add that to the playbook, I guess. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And kind of continuing, is there anything that you would do differently or advice you would give to yourself if you were starting over or give to others? And I guess that'll be in the playbook as well. But
It's really hard to knock on doors when your baby starts learning how to walk. That's, I guess, what I would have told myself. Um, that's really what I would have told myself. I would have tried to knock on those doors earlier when he was happy sitting in a stroller. Um, that's very niche though. As for more broadly applicable advice, I think what everyone told me when I told them that I was, going to run for city council was, you got to knock on doors, you got to walk, you got to knock on doors, and I think that's true. I think that's just what you have to do. Yeah.
okay, thank you. Let's move to Pat. So similarly, this was your first election and the first trustee area election for FUHSD. What did you learn and what surprised you?
If you're not learning, you're probably not alive anymore. So I was learning every minute, every day. What I learned is that when you really believe in something, people can see through that and understand that you're not going to be able to do this yourself. So you have to become vulnerable to not only accept the help, but be ready to ask for help even more. And I learned that when community comes together, great things happen, but they happen in a way that you didn't expect them. It's not evident. Like when you're looking around there, the sun still comes out on the same side. Everything looks, traffic is going in the same direction. Everything looks the same, but yet there is this effervescence that we are doing right by those who we are, trying to. And so I think that what I learned is, it's very hard to ask for help. I know that because I see that with my students. They're like, no, I got this. And you can't do this alone. So the more people that show up and you are willing to delegate and trust and share your beliefs, it just makes it so much easier. And you kind of lose shame. I think the precepts, I keep telling people, the precepts upon which you are raised do not apply when you're campaigning. Like my grandma would say, or our elders, don't go talking to strangers. Don't ask people, yes, don't ask people for money, and don't go bragging about yourself. And that's kind of what you have to do. But when you have a team of people who believe in you, then they help that. Like they help you to talk to strangers, and they help you to get the funding and the donations you need. And they help you because they're the ones talking you up, and you don't have to brag so much about yourself. So luckily there are trustee areas, and we were able to do that because I would not be sitting right now here with you if that were not the case. Thank you.
So love that. Next, we'll go to Peggy. Can you talk about the coordination between the many North Sunnyvale campaigns? So Pat Carpio, Eileen Lay, Jessica Spicer. what worked well and what could be improved?
Oh, yeah. There's so many campaigns. What worked well? I think within each of the campaigns, having great communication. We ended up forming WhatsApp groups for both of these campaigns, and Jessica had a consulting company and convened regular meetings. So just having that understanding, like what each of us are doing, what our role is for the campaign, that was very helpful. And I think having people that were able to understand, these are the overlaps in areas. So when we are canvassing, we can say, oh, hey, Patrick, can we also get your literature and yours as well? Larry, we're hitting this area. And to make sure that there's enough, there's that redundancy in effort, because there's just so much happening all at the same time, and so many things, like so many people that we wanted to support in our measures as well. So it's like drinking from a fire hose, and you just do the best you can, and then you're very relieved that it's over.
Any others want to speak about kind of the coordination and
I want to give a shout out to Jessica Jarecki. I don't know if you're online, but she was her self-appointed title was data overlord, our data overlord, our Excel spreadsheet wizard, and she was able to help so much with setting up these programs that none of us had ever thought about or heard of before. The ones that we ended up using were voter.vote and eCanvasser, which unlike PDI, which is a little bit more expensive, was a little bit more she had to set it up. She had to set it up, and she did for each of our campaigns. She helped us like draw our maps for canvassing and everything. And I just want to say thank you. I don't think this would have worked the same way without her.
Thank you. Pat, anything else about the coordination? What worked? What didn't?
I think that like I do want to give a shout out to all the core team, but they bring so many talents that I wouldn't do them justice. But yeah, I mean, data overlord, the name says it. I think that work well specifically for my campaign was the people who were willing to give up so much of their time to work to get the representation that North Sunnyvale had so longed for such a long time. And they would show up via Zoom. They would show up in person. They would walk when I was too tired. They would ask me what I needed and help me present my message even more than I thought, even better than I thought I could do. So it was the support of so many people. And then because of that, I mean, I'm sitting here with folks that, I've known Peggy, she's volunteered in my room. I've known Eileen, she's, our board member for the district where I work. And I know that the mayor is Larry Klein, but I referred to him as Mr. Klein until a few months ago because we weren't close, but convening on this level, this dimension of campaigning makes you become close to people that are going through the same thing you're going through. So I bring it back to people who want to help you make it better. And I think the thing that also helped in my particular campaign is there was no drama. It was just smooth. The people would say, I can take care of this and I'll do this. And there was no like wanting accolades or needing validation. It was just, what else can I do? And I was always humbled because I have a full-time job. So sometimes I was very limited by what I could do for the campaign. And yet magically things got done and people showed up. And I would get emotional sometimes because it's like, wow, um, I guess I was just lucky or fortunate, or like I keep going back to this was meant to be. Otherwise, it wouldn't have felt like everything fell into place so easily. But people were behind me 100%, and I'm very grateful for that. It's a lot of work.
Okay, thank you.
I have another shout out.
Yes.
Patrick Ahrens' army of interns. There were so many of them and they were fantastic. And a lot of them were high schoolers, but not all of them. And I just love these young people getting so involved in local government. There were some of them were overlapping with Evan Lowe's campaign for Congress, but they were fantastic. It is fantastic. I say Patrick Ahrens' army of interns, and that like immediately conjures to your mind, of course, like dozens of young people, and that's what it was. It was dozens of young people who were ready to help us knock on doors and tell us about Patrick, tell voters about Patrick, but also the rest of us, and that was awesome. That was just awesome.
And I'll second that. And actually, Patrick's on his way, so he'll be able to talk about his interns. I lost a few interns to Evan and Patrick's campaigns, but to table with them at the farmers market, to see, and to have them, out there passing out the literature for the mayor, it was difficult, I'll say, to be the incumbent mayor. So thank you. Thanks to all the great people that ran for the first time. It was difficult to be the incumbent mayor by so many people that it's like, you have this without a problem. And so sometimes it was difficult to get that support for people to go out. So relying on people that are walking in specific districts, the city, the mayor represents the whole city. So if you want to pass out the lid in North Sunnyvale or South Sunnyvale or Central, it's like, it's all good for me because it was difficult at times. But yeah, I really enjoyed working with, especially Patrick's volunteers, and especially that next generation that wants to get involved. It's like, can't vote yet, but they're out there. That's like, can't vote, can't drive. My mom is dropping me off for tabling at the farmers market, and out there getting people and talking to people about Patrick, about the mayor, about Measure E, just trying to be engaged is just fantastic, and gives me hope for the next generation in the future. So happy to see that.
Thank you. Okay, next question is for everyone. So there were a number of candidate forums that were held. Livable Sunnyvale, Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action, Legal Women Voters, I don't know how many others. How were they helpful, and what did you like about them? How could they be improved?
I didn't participate in any forums because I ran unopposed, but let me just mention that when I was listening to the Livable Sunnyvale, that forum with Danny and Pat, it was remarkable to hear their voices and then to think, oh my goodness, like these voices on the high school board, we haven't had that kind of representation, and to have that kind of hope and see them up there, like it really made me really emotional and very like excited for the future for our students.
Thank you for that. And again, I go back to, it's the people who uplift you. Candidate forums, it gives me a kind of a flashback to sitting before a panel defending a thesis, and those are tough. So there were 3 hours of sleep, 2 hours of sleep at night. I was doing a lot of research, and I was wondering when the summer would be over so I could go back to work and relax a little and kind of be more calm. And so what I take from that is I actually wrote out my answers to every question. I rehearsed for myself. And even my husband was like, you really want this because you're not really sleeping much, sometimes not even eating, and you're on it. And I was, but what I take is that I learned so much. I would not have studied a lot of these topics without those questionnaires in front of me. And now I feel more confident and competent when I'm speaking about a topic because I remember those questions and I remember my answers. After a while, you kind of find your voice when you're responding, but sitting before a group of people who are recording you, by the way, as is now, and knowing that this will be there for posterity, it makes you more self-aware that these answers matter, that your convictions will be measured, and then you have to really analyze and go within yourself and ask, what do I stand for? And it helps you to polish your own message, your own ethos of who you are as a candidate in this race. So as much as it was hard, it was productive and it was worth it.
Yes, everything that was said previously. I think having the forums and similarly endorsement processes like the one that the Dems Club did really helped me personally hone what had at the beginning of my campaign started as sort of amorphous, like I want things to be better, but how do I want to do that? And really like having people ask me that question on very, very specific sometimes issues helped me really take that amorphous want and turn it into something more approaching a policy position on a lot of issues. So just on the level of how I was able to just, within myself, organize my thoughts and organize these things. I was tremendously helpful for that because, oh, I see Patrick. There he is. Okay, great. There he comes. So that was very helpful for me personally. And I didn't recite. I'm not a reciter. I don't practice. There's a alternate universe somewhere where I'm an improv comic instead of a chemist. But it I it did help me just like polish those things in my own head before, spitting it out. So hi Patrick.
And as far as, candidate forums, to me, I think they're very well, they're useful for the candidates. I've been through them. This was my fourth campaign. So I've done lots of candidate forums, but it's exactly that. It helps you gain your voice, help you better define your response and your ideas and what you stand for, especially in 1 minute, 90-second bites, which is always difficult, not knowing what those questions are going to be. And that's one of the things we kind of ties back to what was talked about earlier as far as walking doors, knocking on doors and getting that random question is exactly what a candidate forum is. And that to me, for candidates that aren't walking doors, knocking on doors, talking to the random person to get that random question, it makes you even less, let's say, less prepared for when the candidates forums come, because that's what they come down to. And you can prepare as much as you want, but you never know what random question that you're going to get. Or, what I liked, you talked about candidate forums, things that could be improved or things that I liked. There was at least one candidate forum where my opponent went over the 1 minute timeline, question after question after question. And for me, it's like I stayed within the boundaries. I might have went over like once, but if the moderator for the forum basically allows them to do that, it just continues. And so always a good thing, making, from a candidate standpoint, making the timer, the countdown, making a countdown timer and not just raising signs that either people watching online don't realize that, oh, this person has went over and over again isn't useful. It's bad. It's hard for the candidates. It's like you're allowing them to break the rules one more time. And so that was a difficult one of the things I loved about the livable Sunnyvale forum was the random question. It's not something. It's like what store that you would like to see in Sunnyvale or something of that nature, which isn't our standard like policy question. I do like when we make it a little bit lighter and just focus on or ask those questions that aren't necessarily tied to. It's like, okay, what are you doing on housing or traffic or the schools or the issues, which are important, but it's nice to have a little levity at times. And that was actually very good. Anyway, thank you.
All right. Welcome, Patrick Ahrens. Thank you. And we are doing kind of a round robin of different questions, but I did have a couple that were specifically for you. So it'll be a surprise. But first, we are on the topic of candidate forums. And if you have anything, what did you like? What did you not like about the candidate forums, the various ones that you participated?
I didn't like anything about them. What I enjoyed about candidate forums were it really trained me as a candidate to talk about really complicated issues affecting the state of California and our local governments. And you had to be concise, succinct, and you had to be able to deliver a message. And, we had topics range from transportation, climate change, public education, public safety, and how are you going to solve them? And oh, by the way, you're going to get 60 seconds. And so not only do you have to sound good, you have to sound convincing, but you have to convince people to support you in 60 seconds or less on very complicated issues. But that's about how much time you get at somebody's door before they want to close the door in your face. And so it really trained me as a candidate to be concise. You know, most people are living their lives struggling to afford to live here, or busy with their day, or raising their kids, or what, or work, or whatever. And most people don't spend a lot of time on a Saturday talking about politics, like most of us here do. And so how can you deliver a message effectively to people who you want to reach and you want them to support you in a way that is effective, in a way that is convincing? And I think the forums there really help train you to be able to not only have a vision, but to do so in a very limited amount of time.
Great, thank you. All right, back to you. Another question specifically for you. On presidential election years, California moved its primary from June to March, which creates a very long campaign season and lowers voter turnout for the primary. Should we change this?
Well, yes,
60 seconds. Oh,
the infinite wisdom of Sacramento. Well, that was originally designed for the presidential election years. The argument several years ago when the legislature changed it was designed to have California be more relevant in the electoral college. Because if you had it so late in June, you know, people mostly come to California who are presidential candidates to raise money, right? You're not using it to, and so the legislature wanted California to have a say in the electoral college moving forward, that they would actually have to come and we can help decide and put someone over the edge. That being said, it's a very long road to November, and I know that more than most. And I think that anything that we can do to make things more pronounced in terms of more participation is going to be really vital. I think that even when it was in June, we didn't have great voter turnout. We probably have even less in the March primaries, but we've come a long way. We have free postage now, so you can turn in your ballot. The vast majority of folks are vote by mail. What I'm more concerned about when it comes to election results and voter participation is what the federal government is or is not going to be planning on in terms of you know, a whole litany of proposals that we're hearing from, you know, Project 2025 and meddling in our elections. And the governor has called for a special session of the legislature to prepare for that and much more. I'm hearing about mandatory voter ID laws and all these other issues of voter intimidation tactics in the future. And so I think we just, it should be a conversation that we should always review and say, is this really the best path? But it's also going to be part of a much larger conversation. And a lot of the air is frankly going to be sucked out of the room about what is California going to be reacting to in terms of, you know, our elections being under attack. But it's definitely a conversation that I'm willing to have. But there's larger components there. We have an amazing chair of our elections committee and Assemblymember Gail Pellerin, who is a former registrar for many years in Santa Cruz County. And I'd love to take her cues on a lot of these conversations, but we can definitely have that conversation with her. Sorry, that was over 60 seconds. See, it's hard.
Next question also for you. How did the independent expenditures impact your race?
Who made these questions? Was there anything else, or was that the whole question?
There's more, but
Okay, well, um, they had certainly an impact. I will say that, um, what do I say? Uh, my race was probably the most expensive race in the state of California in terms of independent expenditures, who spent between my campaign, my opponent's campaign, and the independent expenditures spent over $4 million on a dem race. And so there's a lot of electioneering and election interference, I would call it, in a lot of our examples. But it is ever since Citizens United and the ability to raise huge sums of money, some of it dark money, some of it you can't disclose, some of it you find out later who is paying for it, is really problematic in our government. And the state can only do so much because of the Supreme Court ruling. But I would say that I was told that I'm going to raise everybody's utility rates if I get elected, even though the legislature has no control over that. The CPUC does. I was told that I helped ram through $1 billion bailout of PG&E in exchange for campaign donations and killing people in the campfires. I was told that I raised tuition 5 times in the community college, and you know, just a lot of terrible things were said. And so I think that what I'm optimistic about is that when people get negative mail these days, I think people kind of see it for what it is and reject it, whether it's negative against me, whether it was negative against my opponent. I think people are just really turned off, especially in Silicon Valley, of when they see negative mail, they kind of tend to not believe it, which I'm really grateful for. But it's really problematic because as someone who's worked so hard, you want to be able to define who you are yourself and not by independent expenditures. And so I still have people, when I was knocking on doors to this day, think that I helped kill people in the campfires. And so, you know, we've got work to do to further educate people about, you know, what our public policy and elected officials do and don't do and who we are. But that's my job now, is to stay engaged enough with the community and fight and pass good bills and be transparent and be accessible to show people that we are not the boogeyman that the independent expenditures make us out to be.
Patrick's talking about independent expenditures, and I wanted to say that because of the Citizens United, the rule is that your campaign cannot coordinate with a PAC, with PACs, and so you can't give them messaging. And the way that other people get around that is a practice that I personally find very offensive. It's red boxing. And if you are a candidate and you want a PAC supporting you to put out certain messaging about your opponent, you put it on your webpage under the media page, and then you put a red box around it. So you say something like Democratic and independent likely voters need to know X, and then you send it out. And that is apparently not coordinating, but I think that is an extremely problematic read of that law. And I don't know if that's something that our future assemblyman can address, because I feel like this might be a federal thing, but that to me was a very low point in this particular campaign season. Also, I want to say that I've been part of the Sunnyvale Education Foundation for a number of years, and I'm not a stranger to begging for money. Like we ask our local corporations for money, and the biggest check that we get as an education foundation, that by the way helps all of the schools within the Sunnyvale School District to do extracurricular activities and other programming that wouldn't be otherwise available to them, like music programs, putting on musicals. We get 100K. We get 100K from Google, and that's our big check, and we are very happy to get it. the amount of money that goes into campaigns from independent expenditures that Patrick was just talking about, $4 million, if that went into the community instead, the unbelievable benefits that would have for all of us, that it's just mind-boggling to me. When I think about campaign money, I think as a school board trustee, how many teachers could this pay for? And the average teacher, not that we hire average teachers, gets about 100K a year. And that's so many teachers. That's so many teachers that we could pay for. Okay.
And I'll just add a little bit about IEs as well as just misinformation. So one of the things that I did in my campaign is basically just keep a positive campaign. Try to keep it on issues, try to keep it on what I would do. The IEs in my campaign were fear mongering our residents, you know, doing statistical. It's like, oh, did you know that crimes with guns increased 70% in the last year? Was one of the mailers against me that I didn't have a vision to deal with it. Well, it had increased 70%. 10 years ago, it was 20. Then it was 13, and then it was 17, and it was 14. 2 years ago, it was 10. Last year, it was 17. And yes, crime with guns has went up 70%, but it's fear mongering the residents that your city is terribly unsafe, which to me wasn't a good message. And then I had my opponent actually do misinformation. You know, the mayor killed this project. Well, this proposal, the mayor and 5 other council members didn't agree with a certain idea that was proposed. Yes, the mayor was part of that majority of council that didn't think your proposal made sense. And then just pure misinformation and texting that luckily I have residents that just didn't respond or ask me about this text. But I constantly was dealing with people that it's like, you're trying to give away our city's money in a UBI, guaranteed basic income program. And it's like, well, we have a study issue that my opponent co-sponsored, but he's calling me a UBI mayor. He's saying that I'm ready to give away $4 million of your taxpayers' dollars that could go to police officers. So there was definitely a negative campaign. And I heard at the end of the campaign, I heard from a lot of people that it's like, thank you for keeping a positive campaign. Thank you for talking about what your plans are for the city, what you've accomplished, and what you would like to see done, and not just attacking your opponent. I think, as you know, Patrick said, people are tired of the negative campaigning. It's what you're going to do for our city, which makes a difference. But it was a constant, let's say, trying to fight the misinformation that was out there, because you can't reach everyone. And once that negative message goes out into the community, it's then you're basically playing defense against a message that might be true, might be misinformation, but sometimes you don't even know it's out in the community until it's too late. So anyway, thank you.
It's a very deep topic. Like, I'm sure we could go very far into this. But just kind of quickly, is there anything that candidates can do? And I know during the heat of the campaigning, everything's moving so fast, and one of these things comes out maybe that you don't agree with. Is there anything that you can do? And then secondly, is there anything that can be done through state legislation, knowing that the hands are tied because of the federal rules?
So much of our hands are tied because of the Supreme Court and Citizens United and in the name of so-called freedom of speech. But what I tell people of is what you can do when you see that sort of negative mail or IEs is throw them in the trash and don't listen to them, because I've yet to see any negative mail or campaigning be anywhere near accurate. And when you do, whether it's the candidate themselves or IEs, if you're going negative, then chances are it makes
for them because they're just spending all their time attacking one candidate, not talking about what your vision is and what you actually want. And our politics have gotten so angry that we need to be focusing on what we can do for others, what vision we have for Sunnyvale and the rest of Silicon Valley. So what I tell people throughout the campaign trail is just throw the negative realize the trash.
pay attention to them or contact the candidates directly. There's also very clear signs about who pays for these ads that you'll be surprised. You know, a lot of people will come up and say, oh, I got your mail or I got your opponent's mail. And it's like, it was not my opponent's mail. It was not my mail because it was sent out without us coordinating who we are, who our opponent was, or who I am without, you know, us legally knowing. And so I don't think that's particularly effective. I think between all the candidates here on this stage, we went to, I don't know how many house parties, I don't know how many public events. Many of us sent out so much outreach that I think that if you have questions about any of the negative campaigning that you're getting or what have you, go talk to them directly. I think one of the reasons why I feel all of us won is because we made ourselves abundantly accessible. We're still recovering.
And again, I thank all the panelists for being here and being accessible for this meeting. Okay, so this is another question for everyone. Also kind of loaded, but here we go. Should we consider ranked choice voting in Sunnyvale, in Santa Clara County, in California?
So personally, the place I think that would have made the biggest change in the ranked choice voting is for races where there are more than two candidates like mine, or in our neighbor Cupertino, where their city council and their school board have very close races in some cases. And I think really having that vote split and not being able to have ranked choice voting led to some interesting outcomes. I think there are places where it could be, where it would be helpful to have had that. But I've also seen some studies showing that ranked choice voting is just confusing. It's just confusing to people, and you see a lot less civic participation. So I would be open to discussing it, but it's complicated. It's a loaded topic, and we really need to weigh the pros and cons.
So I was on the Charter Review Committee back in 2006, and we discussed it at length then. Of course, the county registrar at that point couldn't do, it wasn't even feasible or wasn't part of the process. It's now the supervisors are having the registrar implement that. And we're actually, it's one of the topics that we're impaneling a Charter Review Committee, and they will be looking at that. It is a loaded issue. You know, there's mistakes been made. It's the confusion. I do think it has very positive things, especially in cities where they have primaries, so they can conceivably skip a whole process of having a primary election and then a November election. So it would conceivably save the city some money. And from a campaign standpoint, there wouldn't be the early in the year primary and then a whole bunch more money spent in November. It would conceivably shorten that election runway to some degree. But yeah, that's one of the topics. If you have an opinion, the Charter Review Committee will be talking about it next year. And we'll see whether or not to put it on the ballot in 2026, what recommendations come from the committee, what council decides to put as a ballot measure. But, you know, it has been talked about previously, and there's lots of advocates and some pluses and minuses, but at the end of the day, it will be the will of Sunnyvale voters on whether they want to make that change in the future.
Thank you. Yes, it is a loaded question. And again, I go back to, I'm a teacher and I have to break things down for my students all the time. ranked choice voting is, I'm sorry, ranked choice voting is something you have to break down for me. And when I say that, I am engaged. I try to figure out what's happening. I am a language teacher, so I know that my husband, he figures things out right away because he's just math is another form of his languages. And so it makes so much sense. And I try to figure it out with him. And still, it's like if I had to vote for somebody like this, I'd be very confused personally. So then I extrapolate that to your ordinary citizen and wonder, like, are we informed enough and do we know enough of the statistical analyses that you would carry out to find out really what's in your best interest as a voter? So I just want, I mean, I do hear and understand what has just been said, and I know it wouldn't be something that we're discussing if it didn't have positives. So there is obviously there are areas there that would benefit a lot of us. However, I am wondering, just like Aileen said, do we understand it well enough when it comes down to having the ballot in front of us to be able to make informed choices without having to go to a consultant and asking them about, help me figure out this formula. Thank you.
Well, my former boss, Assemblymember Lowe, is the author of ranked choice voting in Santa Clara County. And so his bill codified into law that was signed by the governor last year, the year before, that would allow Santa Clara County elections to have the potential for ranked choice voting. So the Board of Supervisors is debating those issues right now. And so the will of the voters, I believe in the late 90s, passed, I think, either by itself or with term limits, the ability to have ranked choice voting in their county supervisor elections or other county-wide elections. I agree with some of my colleagues. I think there is needs to be the conversation that needs to continue. But I will say people feel very strongly one way or another about ranked choice voting. You have folks that I talk to who are just think it's the most wonderful thing since the invention of democracy, and that it's going to help cure the anger in our elections and it's going to help simplify things. And you have others who say it's confusing, they don't understand it. I think it's something that we need to continue having that conversation with, but there are other examples where people have implemented ranked choice voting. I, for one, think that there are merits on both sides, but I still see too much anger in our politics. So I don't think that that's exactly working, but there is the ability now for Santa Clara County to implement it. But that's being debated by the Board of Supervisors, and that's their decision.
Okay, thank you. Guys still have energy? I have more questions. Okay, cool. All right. So I'm going to ask you all to address the coming elephant in the White House and the elephant in the room, which is the red shift we saw across the country and also in California. How can Sunnyvale Democratic Club and all of us as people resist attacks against democracy, support vulnerable communities, and the rule of law? What will we be called to do?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the governor has called for a special session to address the question that you just asked. But I would go a little bit further than that. As Sunnyvale Democrats, as folks who are going to be starting, especially who got reelected, and especially in their new roles on school boards and city councils, or even myself as a freshman legislator, we need to be more than just addressing and reacting to the incoming federal administration. I think the voters had made it very clear in this election, and seeing the swing and so many of our counties turning more red, that we can no longer just be reacting. We have to have an offensive strategy, and we can't just be a platform that is anti one president or anti MAGA. We need to show folks, especially those who are hurting, especially those um, who really are looking to local leaders for vision and help, what we have to offer. I think us as Democrats, especially the local Democratic Party, we're very good about getting involved. Our rhetoric is great, but we need to show people that we're here for them, and people are hurting right now. And so the legislature needs to pivot to be more than just we're anti this person, we're anti the incoming federal administration, we're preparing for this. We know, and we should do all of those things, but we also should be coming up with our own local proposals, things that the Sunnyvale City Council has done so well over the past several years, things that our school boards have done so well, but we need to continue to do those things and show others the way of it's not just about reacting, it's about protecting our students, protecting our residents, getting more money in their pocket, getting more access to job opportunities and higher education and apprenticeship programs. We need to have a vision in our own platform.
So I think this is a good opportunity for us in Sunnyvale to, you know, as our club also to look at our membership and to try to engage more people, different demographics, different ages, and find ways to become more engaged, like actual things to do, you know. And, you know, we've talked about some ways that maybe we could kind of make this a moment where we look at ourselves as Sunnyvale Democrats and like what defines us, as well as the bigger Democratic Party. Who are we? What's the platform? But I agree with Patrick that you know, once we realize what the outcome would be at the federal level, I just started thinking about like am I now? How can I, as a school board member, you know, help protect our families and our students? And again, not being reactive, but thinking proactively. What do we need to do? You know, what is our locus of control here? And do that as best as we can. You know.
Okay, I think you're going to find a theme here with me being a teacher. I was very excited to look at the results for my personal race, but I couldn't enjoy them as much as I thought I would because of everything else that was going on. And so this happened on a Tuesday, and on Wednesday, we're back at work. And right in my classroom, I saw the two situations going on. The couple of students who were not being themselves, they were looking sullen and concerned and kind of, you know, off the energy. And I took you know, I took interest. I said, "Are you okay?" And the response was kind of like, you know, "I don't want to talk about it." And without disclosing too much, one of the other students said he's afraid his parents are going to be deported. And on the other side of the room, diametrically opposed, the student who came in through that door said, "Finally, it's great to be white again in America." And these are 13-year-olds that are hearing these messages around them. And so it kind of hit me like, okay, now you're not just the teacher, you're also an elected official on her way to enact policy to protect the safety of everybody in the classroom and everybody in the district and everybody that you can. And so that got really personal because I can't be taking sides with anybody, but I do have to reassure my students that things are going to be okay, no matter what they're hearing, no matter what is being filtered down at their level. And so today was the first day after, like, I don't know how many months I was campaigning, maybe 6, or like I said, I went to the beach. And I used to have a beach day with my husband every week. It was a Saturday. So we kind of made an effort. And today I went to the beach and it was so nice. I was having a wonderful time. So it was idyllic. And then I said, we do have to get back because, you know, I have to go do this 2 o'clock thing. And so we're driving back and, you know, the scenery, everything is just so pleasant. And then on somebody's gate, there was this big banner that said Trump won. And that kind of unsettled the whole trip because it put me in a position where I'm going to go back to this. And this impacts what I do every day. So it impacts my students, it impacts their families. So what locus of control, like I just heard, what agency do I have around that? And I was thinking, well, this is deja vu. I've been in this situation 8 years ago. That happened. And it happened at the former school I was teaching as well. A little bit more dramatic, but it was happening and I needed to react to that. And I remember in those days, what I started seeing more were translated little cards of your rights, know your rights, and they were in Spanish, and they were appearing in the staff room, and they were appearing in spaces, you know, just come almost kind of like you wouldn't expect them. And I thought I need to do something like that. Have connections to people who can say, hey, if you need legal advice, you can go here. Because maybe you hadn't thought of that. Like, oh, now I need somebody to advise me legally. Like, if you need assurance for food or something, you can go here. And it's safe, and people will support you, and you will not be judged, and you will because again, a lot of the communities are having fear around. I don't want to put my name or my demographics out there because now I'm on a database somewhere. And so they don't want their children to talk to that subject either. Even if it's a teacher, they're a little bit skeptic, like my student, oh, I don't want to talk about it. And so you have to be gracious and afford people their dignity, but also offer them information, because right now information will help us to despise a lot of this smoke and fog and fear that we see, because we are wondering what is this going to become if we have no locus of control. And information and being there for one another at this very, very, like, I think always classroom level, because these are the generations that we are promoting to go forward with the right attitude and the right will to change the world for the better, and for their parents who are afraid to ask, to say, you can do something about it, and we're going to help you.
So election day was a Tuesday, and on Tuesday is just happens to be the day that I volunteer in my son's fourth grade classroom. I lead a reading group. And we were reading this book. It's called Nightmares by Jason Segall. Yes, Jason Segall wrote a book, a kid's book. And the concept of the book basically is that your nightmares come to life, right? You're in this land where your nightmares come to life, and you have to fight those. But this girl, my son's in fourth grade, so this girl must have been about 10. But she just, like, unprompted told me about how after Trump was elected in 2016, when she must have been 2, they stopped speaking Spanish in public. Like, her family, like, trained their 2-year-old to stop speaking Spanish in public. And that just stuck with me all day. So I didn't let myself hope deeply enough to truly be disappointed by the results of the election. It was something that I was, like, watching, but not, like, hopeful for exactly, not fearful either, but just kind of existing within a liminal space where I wasn't trying to jinx it for myself by hoping too hard. So the election happened, and it happened, and I don't think any of us are ready. The thing with 2016 was that we were very much in reaction mode. Like, he said all these things, but I don't think anyone really expected him to do a Muslim ban or do any of these things. And it was exhausting. It's exhausting to constantly be in a reactionary space where you're looking to see what the other side's going to do so that you can counter it. This time, I think we literally have their playbook. We know what they want to do. We know what they want to execute on. And so I think it's easier for us to not be reacting all the time, but to take concrete steps in the directions that we want to take. And the thing about the direction that we want to take is that it can't just be an opposition party. We can't just be a not Donald Trump. It's going to be harder to move the country in a progressive direction. But that's something that we still need to fight for. In California, where we where a lot of our counties, our city councils, our state legislature is very, very democratic, very, very progressive. I think I'm quoting Richard Mellinger in the back of the room there, where it is our duty to show that progressive governance works. Like this is what we can do. This is how it works. Like people shouldn't be looking at California and saying, ha ha, look at that, look at them. They should be, we need to show them like this is how we handle homelessness. This is how we handle food insecurity, housing insecurity. And that's what we can do. That's what we need to do.
Thank you. Yeah, as far as being ready to fight, being prepared, I do think that I have faith in our legislature and, Rob Bonta. I was immediately talking to, District Attorney or Jeff Rosen from a county standpoint, talking to county supervisors. We went through this whole thing before. So, definitely we know what the Trump administration might be doing and what we can do to protect our residents. I've talked to the city manager, I've talked to the chief, things that we had to do back in 2017, 2018. I still remember in meeting with the Iranian Christian Church when Trump was basically saying all these things about Iran. And their members to this day are very thankful. I basically said, if anything happens, because there was such hatred being put out in the community against Iran, if you have any incidents, reach out to DPS, reach out to the mayor, make sure that, your members should feel safe in our community. And if you don't feel safe, we can work on it. We can try to help out. What the club can do is build community. It's critical to build the membership, be out there in the community. That positive message makes a difference. Between being reelected, thank you for all the people who voted for me. But we lost for people that voted for mayor 4 years ago to this year, we lost 5,000 voters. Now, definitely it's a down ballot and all of that, but it's always a down ballot for mayor. Citywide, we lost 5,000 people. Some might have moved away, but that's a large number that didn't make it that far into the ballot to vote for their mayor. So, and I'm not sure what can be taken from that and haven't done all the data analysis, but from a city standpoint, having more engaged residents, whether or not it's just voting or being part of the community, as I was saying earlier, giving back to commissions and things of that nature, that's the critical thing. And yes, it's not directly fighting a Trump administration, but the stronger we are together as a community, the more that your neighbors, the better off we'll be, whether or not it's, this administration or future administrations. It's just trying to make Sunnyvale a better place. So that's what this club can do, increase membership, get some of Patrick's volunteers to show up here, or have their parents drop them off, because it's that next generation that is important. But it's just building community. That is the best thing we can do to make sure that, we have a diverse city, and making sure that we welcome that diversity is one of the best things that we can do to fight a potential, any potential issues the administration might have here.
All right, new microphone. Okay, I just have one last question. And again, we've touched on this a little bit already, but I wanted to go a little bit deeper. But we could spend 2 hours on it. But so we already talked a little bit about independent expenditures and how they can highlight disinformation with social media and the co-opting of platforms for political influence playing a large role in the elections nationwide. What is needed to counter disinformation, and how can local government ensure it is a sought-after source of trusted information and services?
That's a very difficult question. You know, and for me to have the negative information that was put out there, you know, for me it was putting out just positive information, and it's hard to fight misinformation with the positive information. I just want to say thank you to those who, because from a candidate standpoint, it's hard to directly go one-on-one with misinformation, because the problem with that is you're either seeing as you're just the opposing side and you're putting out your own misinformation, but it's having residents, having, you know, supporters that would pick up that baton and fight for you, you know, and basically say, this isn't right. This is handpicked data. This is not correct, you know, from a messaging standpoint. From a city standpoint, they have to stay out of politics. You know, they can put out their independent evaluation of Measure E and Measure F, but at the end of the day, they can't run campaigns. From a candidate standpoint and from a mayor's bully pulpit standpoint, you know, it's putting out that positive information and having that track record, creating a platform that people trust is definitely was one of the reasons why I got reelected, is because as much as people, you know, it's like the Eat Sunnyvale, the mayor's restaurant project, the number of people that's like, thank me for that, for being out in the community and just, you know, highlighting all the good that's happening here. That is important. So it's having those trusted sources of information is really critical. And then just, you know, it's hard because the way social media is today to deal with those ongoing issues. And there's not an easy counter at the end of the day to what happens. So thanks.
I want to say that when I think of social media, of misinformation in the community, in addition to this past election, I think a lot about the community trustee area process at Fremont. There was so much misinformation in the community. It's a huge problem. Like the way that information is decimated, especially within closed communities, within things like WeChat, WhatsApp, Discord to some extent, like you really get an echo chamber. And how do we penetrate that? That's such a huge thing for me. One of the things that I do is I volunteer with the Vietnamese progressive nonprofit. We're called Pivot. We do something called Viet Fact Check, which is kind of like Snopes, but in Vietnamese, it translates. And so within the Vietnamese community during COVID, we had so much disinformation that was disseminated through YouTube. So because it was disseminated through YouTube, we had people who could watch it and who could like counter it. But that was, you know, it's limited in how far it reaches. You have people who go there to read it because they were pointed there by, you know, their friends or something. I think it's important to have accurate information out there. The degree to which you can force someone to learn something if they are obstinately opposed to learning about that because they just don't want to believe you, or they believe in an alternative reality. You guys remember alternate facts? Man, I hate that. Anyway, they believe in alternate facts, or they believe in some really interesting conspiracy theories. Like, I don't know how to counter that. It's something that we do need to work towards, and it's going to explode even more, I think, as a problem, especially with younger generations moving towards short form media like TikTok and YouTube Shorts. Like, you can't get nuance through those. It's something that I think we as a society really need to think about very deeply.
Thank you. Well, before this campaign, I didn't even have Facebook. And so I relied on people, talking to people and checking in with, old school, like, how are you doing? What's on your mind? And making time. And so I've learned through this campaign that people pay attention to social media. I also know my students rely on social media for almost everything that they know about the world, because teachers, what do we know? I'm sorry. No, I meant that ironically. But I do this in the classroom on purpose. I write the date incorrectly. And I wait until I see somebody like, do I correct her or do I just assume that that's okay? But I tell them when they're new to me, you will see me make mistakes all the time. Most of them will be fictitious mistakes to see if you're paying attention, but there will be some human mistakes where I don't know if it's a Friday. So you'll have to correct me either way. And then I'll ask you, is that a pretend mistake or a real mistake? And you'll have to know because that's the world you live in. Just because it's on TikTok doesn't mean it's accurate. And just because your friend told you doesn't mean it's true. You have to make your own choice. And one of our standards in education is that our students are critical consumers of information and that they become informed consumers of everything around them because they, that's their agency. However, they're 12, 13. So, there's a lot of, I guess, absoluteness going on in their worlds. It's either this or that. There's no negotiation in between. And so, having the ability to correct the teacher, this figure of authority gives them power, and then they know why it's wrong. And then I also purposely look for literature that is published with mistakes. I should have, I guess in my former life, I was an editor. I show them that and I pause every now and then on the video and ask them, where's the mistake? And they're like, and then they get points, of course, if they find it. So I tell them, I paid money for this book or I paid money for this subscription and it's out there and you're looking at it. It doesn't mean it's right. Your job is to know what is. And so at that very granular level, I hope that they feel comfortable with correcting things that are not right and speaking out to them. And it doesn't matter if the figure of authority is doing it. Maybe they're doing it on purpose, or maybe they don't know any better. But those that do have authentic information will say, hey, Ms. Carpio, are you sure that's the right date? Because I don't think so. And I'm like, thank you so much. Here you go. You get a little dojo point or something. And they like that because it's rewarded. It's rewarding people for knowing better. And they're 12 or 13 and they're the generation that is going to help us have a better space. So I guess, like I say, we go back to the theme of teaching people to know better so they can do better. But in our community, giving them also the sense of I do tell them, don't go talking back to your grandparents or your parents. Don't do that, but do say, are you sure that's okay? Because I know this, and then cite the source because maybe your parents or grandparents know that source is not valid or valuable. And then they'll have a conversation because you need to start having these conversations. And they're also curious what a board member does now that they know that I got elected. So now I have another job besides being a teacher. I have to tell them that you are affecting the future. And when I say you, I mean the students, because just yesterday I went to a choir. They were great at Fremont, and my former students came and they huddled around me. Miss Carpio, you're here now, and they think that I'm going to go work there. I guess like I'm going to be a teacher there, and that's so neat that they they want to engage and everything. But I have to explain to everybody what the job of a board member is and how that is distinct from a teacher, and yet how they collide very well and how they dovetail very well. But again, if somebody's making a mistake, don't just sit there and look at it and say, well, they have the authority. It's like, I think that's not okay. And here's my source.
I think we need to regulate social media. I don't know the answers to how to solve or combat disinformation, misinformation. I know that I myself live in an echo chamber wherein I look for things that I want to believe and progressive thought. And so I know that like personally, I should look outside of that and wonder what is the appeal, right, for others? And is there a bridge? Is there a common thread? Like I think we do have more in common than we have that we disagree on. And so in what ways can we bridge our community in that way? Um, I love this idea of teaching our children and ourselves, training ourselves to be critical consumers of information and not just accept what we see and hear, and validating and supporting that questioning of authority. That's lovely. I love that, and it's so important for us each individually to hold each other and ourselves accountable for what we say, for what we disseminate, for how we raise our children.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I question the mayor's authority all the time. Um, I think that a lot of the conversations are happening in the state legislature right now around disinformation, election interference. Um, what is a trusted source? I will say in general, just shameless plug, please subscribe and support local journalism. Um, I'm a subscriber of the Mercury News and San Jose Spotlight. I don't always agree with the Mercury News and San Jose Spotlight, but I think it's really important to support local journalism right now more than ever. We used to have so much more robust accountability and amazing writers, and there's so few journalists covering things these days, and those are two major publications that I feel passionate about supporting. Um, but there is a lot of regulation around privacy concerns that I think we've lost the war on privacy with as consumers over the years. I think there's a lot of there was 50 bills on AI this past legislative cycle. I'm not sure every legislator knows what AI is, and yet there were 50 bills introduced about it. And so I think we have to have and convene these conversations. It was announced a few weeks ago that I'm going to be chairing the Technology and Innovation Caucus in the state legislature. And so part of what I see my role is to convene these conversations with industry, with labor, with consumers, with residents, with consumer watchdog groups to have these kinds of conversations in a meaningful way, not in an echo chamber, but what is the right balance? How do we strike the right tone moving forward where we are getting people to trust certain sources more? We've made certain strides. Right now there's ad libraries on Facebook and Google that you can easily identify where these ads are and who's paying for them and how much are being paid for, but we have a long way to go. I mean, the technology is equal parts fascinating and inspiring and scary as hell. We can record online the mayor and the council members' voices in their YouTube page, and in seconds you can have an AI generated voice that sounds pretty damn close to Larry's, and you can make him say whatever you want, and then you can put it in an ad. It's really inspiring and amazing technology, and a lot of it's unregulated right now, and we're at the beginning of what this powerful technology can do, and it's changing exponentially. And so we need to stay ahead of that. The state of California needs to stay on top of that, because remember, what we decide as a state legislature in California, cities will adopt, school board members will adopt, and other states often look to the state of California on cutting edge legislation to adopt as well. And so we need to make sure that we're very thoughtful about these. Regulation needs to be implemented, but before that, we need to make sure that we are operating under the same set of facts. And even within the Democratic Party, we are not operating on all the same set of facts. And so we've got our work cut out for us. But a priority of mine is going to be to convene these conversations both locally and in the state capitol, to talk to my new colleagues about how do we move forward on these bill ideas in a way that's ultimately protecting the public and our students.
All right. I really just thank you guys so much for being here. Where did she go? Yes. And Pat, interrupting your beach day. I feel bad. Okay. All right. And I do want to open it up to the room for questions, and to those on Zoom, raise your digital hand or your actual hand, and we'll come by with a microphone if you have questions.
Hello. Does this actually work? Okay. We've had, first of all, thank you all for taking part in this panel. This has been an excellent discussion. We've talked a lot about disinformation and misinformation and how that has affected our democracy and just the information environment we're operating in. And Patrick got to this a little bit in his answer about the importance of supporting local journalists. How do we build an information space in Sunnyvale where voters and residents can get accurate, trustworthy information, the information that they need? Because I will say there is a vacuum. Local press does not cover us nearly enough. And the people I talk to are just, they're desperate to know more about what's going on in their community. So how do we start to fill that void? Thank you.
So from a city standpoint, that's one of the biggest, let's say, efforts that I want to make sure the city does over the next year, communicating outwards. So, and there's lots of good ideas, but communication from a city standpoint, one of the reasons why the mayor's social media is so followed is because the city's not doing that job. So that's one thing, putting out the, let's say, the right information, pointing you to that right information that has to do with, websites and everything else. And one of the reasons why historically Sunnyvale hasn't been getting a lot of press is we don't have some of the drama that other cities around us might have, which is good, but it isn't that interesting when, we look at the overall process and it's like, oh, we had, we hired 27 new employees this year because as opposed to other cities that had deficits, we were able to expand city staff and services. Well, that's not a story. That's part of the problem. Being a well-run city means that, yes, it's like the amount of press that we got from the jewelry store break-in was just through the roof. Now, did it say that, oh, we caught 5 people? That we've now raised that to about 10 people from that jewelry store? No, that follow-up information isn't as interesting. We're putting in, and so one of the things that working with the new city manager, we're trying to put out that positive information. We have flock cameras installed, basically license plate readers that have just been installed, was approved with this year's budget. We put them in to make sure that a lot of the crime that we see are people coming into our city either with known gang cars, stolen cars, and doing the catalytic converter thefts and other thefts. Well, we have something that we're now put in place to help prevent that, to help us know that when those cars come in, we immediately send, it pings DPS, and we can send someone out to look at that. That's not an interesting story. It's not been put out there yet. We're working on a press release for that, but it's getting that positive information out there. But, yes, exactly what Patrick said. Support the Mercury News, support the Spotlight. Spotlight has been more interested in putting in kind of those niche articles where the Mercury News has added some. That being said, it's all how much column width you get, and let's say positive stories get a very small mention. If you look at the Sunnyvale Sun, a third of it is Sunnyvale and the other 2/3 is either the county or Santa Clara or Cupertino. It is what it is. It's like we have one reporter that's covering multiple cities and only so much happening in our city. So yes, look and thank you, Richard, for you have your own blog. It's looking for sources of information that completely, that people that you trust, people that you can talk to. Reddit has issues. That being said, it's a platform that people communicate on. Nextdoor is a little bit of an echo chamber that the world is falling in. That being said, I try to visit Nextdoor once a week to put out the positive things that are happening in the city and kind of ignore, the cesspool that it can be at times. But in general, it's trying to find those trusted sources, and the city can do what it can to at least try to put out positive information. but within the campaigns, it's very limited.
I just want to say that I know Pat and I both are very, we want more public engagement in school board meetings. And we at Sunnyvale for Equity and Education, we send out calendar invites that tells what's on the board meetings and then like maybe special topics that might be of interest. And it's just a calendar invite. You can tune in on Zoom. That's one way we can locally just have more dialogue and engagement from the community. I think you had something.
No, I'll just add, agree with the mayor. It's about meeting people where they are, right? And so if the vast majority of our young people are on TikTok and social media, and that's how they get a lot of their sources of news, then we as elected officials need to be on social media and TikTok to be more trusted sources. Our cities need to be on TikTok and social media. We need to, the campaign doesn't stop, right? We're not just sending me to Sacramento, sending Pat and Peggy to the school board and the mayor back to City Hall. Like there's still so much work that needs to be done. And so we need to keep up that momentum, but reach people where they're at. I definitely recommend everyone to subscribe to Richard's blog. There's a great article of his endorsement of me. It's a great read if you're ever interested in having trouble falling asleep. You can read that because Richard was very thorough on so many of the topics that he covered. And Richard also is on Reddit and he posts there regularly. I downloaded Nextdoor and I deleted it the day later for my therapist's suggestion. But some people are on there too for things. You gotta meet people where they are, and that requires pushing our agencies of jurisdiction to meet the residents where they are too, and see if we can get more engagement.
Thank you. I ran and I continue to believe, because that's what I do, my campaign on student voice, and they have a lot to say. And I agree, no news is good news. That's what my grandma would tell me. So it's always reassuring. And Richard, I really appreciate the way you can turn a phrase. It's just so captivating. You have a voice there that I think you can start monetizing. And so maybe you should. So you may have answered your own question. But I have never been interviewed at school, and I've been in education for many, many years. And now students want to interview to publish in their journals and their school newspapers. And I think that they're very curious. They want to know what's going on. And so I would like to piggyback on what Patrick was sharing. Let's work with that. And let's have them come to these trusted sources to ask what is going on, and then put that in a clip of whatever 3 seconds that they like to just enjoy and use. And so there's got to be some entertainment there for them, but I think they're interested. The younger students that we're teaching now are asking questions about politics, and it always puzzles me because I want that to be the case. And then invite them into the conversation through those media preferences that they have. But Mr. Mellinger, I think you've got a business to start.
I think we'll stop there. I don't see any hands online. So again, thank you all so much, and really appreciate it. Let's give a hand to our panelists. All right, I see a hand in the back with Gail. I'll bring a microphone.
I just want to let everyone know we are going to have a holiday feast, sort of. And I think it's 12/15. It's a Sunday this year. So 12/15 at Laughing Monk.
All right.
That's the same place as last year.
Good. All right. Any other announcements that people have before we close? Online. Let's see. Okay. Thank you all. And we'll close the meeting. We can stop the recording. And we'll see you at the holiday party on Sunday, December 15th.